A family went missing on this hiking trail. We found their tent, but no bodies. The crisp autumn air bit at my exposed cheeks as I adjusted the strap of my backpack, the familiar weight settling against my shoulders like a comforting burden. The trailhead sign loomed before me, a weather-beaten wooden sentinel guarding the entrance to the Blackwood National Forest. Blackwood Trail, it proclaimed in faded lettering, followed by a stark warning: experienced hikers only. Proceed with caution. I scoffed inwardly, dismissing the caution as standard Park Service boilerplate. I'd hiked tougher trails than this, faced more challenging conditions. I was a seasoned search and rescue volunteer, after all, and complacency was a luxury I couldn't afford. This wasn't a recreational hike, this was a mission. The Miller family, John, Sarah, and their 8-year-old daughter, Emily, had vanished a week ago. They'd signed in at the trailhead, their destination marked as Hemlock Point, a scenic overlook about 10 miles into the woods. They were experienced campers, well-equipped, and prepared for a 3-day trek. But they never signed out. The alarm was raised on Tuesday, and the search began immediately. Helicopters scanned the area from above, ground teams combed the undergrowth, and tracking dogs sniffed at abandoned articles of clothing. But after days of relentless searching, all they found was their tent pitched perfectly on a designated campsite near Hemlock Point. The tent was empty, meticulously organized, as if the occupants had simply stepped away for a moment. Their backpacks, sleeping bags, cooking gear, everything was there. Except for the Millers. The discovery of the undisturbed campsite deepened the mystery and amplified the unease. It wasn't a bear attack, there was no sign of struggle, no blood, no torn fabric. It wasn't a robbery, nothing of value was missing. It wasn't an accident, the trail to the campsite was clear and well-maintained. The only explanation, and one that sent shivers down my spine, was that they had vanished into thin air. Now, a week later, I was part of a smaller, more specialized team tasked with a ground-level investigation. We were to retrace the Miller's steps, examine the campsite with a fresh perspective, and look for any clues that might have been overlooked. My team consisted of 4 seasoned professionals: myself, a veteran tracker named Ben, a forensic specialist named Maria, and a wilderness survival expert named David. We were a tight-knit unit, chosen for our expertise and our ability to remain calm under pressure. As I stepped onto the trail, the forest closed in around me, swallowing me in its verdant embrace. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting dappled shadows that danced across the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and pine needles. An eerie silence hung in the air, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a crow. We hiked in silence for the first few miles, our eyes scanning the surroundings, our minds focused on the task at hand. The trail was well-worn, easy enough to follow, but as we ventured deeper into the woods, an unsettling feeling began to creep over me. It was more than just the inherent creepiness of the forest, it was a sense of wrongness, a subtle disharmony that prickled at the back of my neck. The trees seemed to be watching us, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The shadows seemed to lengthen and deepen, obscuring the path ahead. The air grew colder, heavier, as if a storm was brewing. After several hours of hiking, we reached the designated campsite, a small clearing nestled amongst a grove of towering hemlock trees. The tent stood in the center of the clearing, a lonely sentinel in a sea of green. As I approached the tent, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The air around the campsite was thick with a cloying sweetness, a sickly sweet odor that made my stomach churn. Maria was already inside the tent, meticulously dusting for fingerprints and collecting samples. Ben was circling the perimeter, his eyes scanning the ground for tracks or signs of disturbance. David was examining the trees, looking for any unusual markings or damage. I stood at the entrance of the tent, taking in the scene. The interior was impeccably organized. The sleeping bags were neatly rolled up, the cooking gear was stacked in a corner, and the backpacks were arranged against the back wall. There was a child's drawing on the floor, a colorful depiction of a family hiking in the woods. It was a scene of idyllic normalcy, a stark contrast to the unsettling reality of their disappearance. "Anything?" I asked Maria, my voice barely a whisper. She shook her head, her face grim. "Nothing that makes sense. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, no blood. It's like they just vanished." Ben approached us, his brow furrowed. "I found some tracks," he said, pointing to a set of faint footprints leading away from the campsite. "They're recent, but I can't identify them. They're not human and they're not animal." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean they're not human or animal?" Ben shrugged. "I don't know. They're just different. The prints are too large for a human, but they don't have the distinct characteristics of any animal I've ever seen." David joined us, his face pale. "I found something on one of the trees," he said, his voice trembling. It's hard to describe. It looks like carvings, but they're not made with a knife or an axe. They're organic, like the tree itself grew them." He led us to a towering hemlock tree, its trunk covered in a series of strange, swirling patterns. The patterns were deeply ingrained in the bark, as if they had been there for centuries. They resembled nothing I had ever seen before. They were unsettling, hypnotic, and vaguely disturbing. As I stared at the carvings, a voice echoed in my mind, a whisper that seemed to come from the trees themselves. "Leave," the voice said. "Turn back. You are not welcome here." I stumbled back, clutching my head, trying to shake off the unsettling sensation. The others looked at me with concern. "Are you all right?" Maria asked. I nodded, trying to regain my composure. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a little lightheaded." We continued to investigate the campsite, but the unsettling feeling only intensified. The air grew colder, the shadows deepened, and the whispers in my mind grew louder. I felt like we were being watched, scrutinized by an unseen presence. A sense of dread washed over me, a primal fear that I couldn't explain. As darkness approached, we decided to set up camp for the night. We built a fire, hoping to ward off the encroaching darkness and the unsettling presence that surrounded us. We ate a silent dinner, our eyes constantly scanning the surrounding woods. After dinner, we sat around the fire, our faces illuminated by the flickering flames. We talked about the Millers, speculating on what might have happened to them. We discussed the tracks, the carvings, and the strange sense of wrongness that permeated the forest. We tried to rationalize the unexplainable, to find a logical explanation for the unsettling events that had unfolded. But deep down, we all knew that something was amiss, something beyond our comprehension. As the night wore on, the forest grew quieter, the silence broken only by the crackling of the fire and the hooting of an owl. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The shadows danced and writhed, taking on grotesque shapes. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Around midnight, I heard a noise in the woods, a rustling in the undergrowth that sounded like footsteps. I nudged Ben, who was sitting next to me, his eyes closed. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. He opened his eyes, his expression alert. "Yeah," he said. "Something's out there." We grabbed our flashlights and cautiously approached the edge of the clearing. We scanned the woods, our beams cutting through the darkness. At first, we saw nothing, but then I caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows. It was a figure, tall and slender, moving silently through the trees. It was too far away to make out any details, but I could tell that it was not human. The figure stopped for a moment, as if it sensed our presence. It turned its head and looked directly at us. Its eyes glowed in the darkness like the eyes of a predator. A wave of terror washed over me. I stumbled back, dropping my flashlight. The figure vanished into the shadows, leaving us alone in the darkness. We stood there for a moment, our hearts pounding in our chests, our minds reeling from what we had just seen. "What was that?" Maria whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, "but I don't think it was friendly." We returned to the fire, our faces pale, our nerves frayed. We sat there in silence, listening to the sounds of the forest, waiting for the dawn. Sleep was impossible. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down my spine. I felt like we were trapped, surrounded by an unseen enemy. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the canopy, a sense of relief washed over me. The darkness had passed, but the fear remained. We packed up our gear and prepared to leave the campsite. We knew that we couldn't stay there any longer. The forest had revealed its true nature, and it was not a place for humans. As we hiked back towards the trailhead, the unsettling feeling persisted. The trees seemed to be mocking us, their branches swaying in the breeze. The shadows seemed to be following us, their forms twisting and contorting. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being hunted. We reached the trailhead late in the afternoon, exhausted and shaken. We signed out, eager to leave the Blackwood National Forest behind. As I stepped onto the paved road, I took one last look back at the forest. The trees stood tall and silent, guarding their secrets. I knew that I would never forget what I had seen, what I had felt in those woods. The Millers were gone, vanished without a trace. Their fate remained a mystery, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the natural world. We reported our findings to the authorities, but they were skeptical. They dismissed our claims of strange tracks and unsettling carvings as hallucinations brought on by stress and exhaustion. They closed the case, declaring the Millers' disappearance a probable accident. But I knew better. I knew that something sinister had happened to the Millers in the Blackwood National Forest. And I knew that the forest was not a place to be trifled with. Years passed and I tried to put the experience behind me. I continued to volunteer with the search and rescue team, but I avoided the Blackwood National Forest. The memories of that trip were too vivid, too disturbing. But the forest never truly left me. It haunted my dreams, invaded my thoughts, and lingered in the back of my mind. I often wondered what had happened to the Millers. Had they stumbled upon something they shouldn't have seen? Had they angered some ancient entity that dwelled in the woods? Had they been taken by something else? One day, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, wooden box, unmarked and unaddressed. I opened the box and found a single object inside, a piece of bark covered in the same strange carvings that we had seen on the hemlock tree. A chill ran down my spine. I knew that the forest was calling me back. I knew that I had to return. I tried to ignore the call, to dismiss it as a coincidence. But the carvings were a constant reminder, a persistent itch that I couldn't scratch. Finally, I succumbed to the urge. I packed my gear, notified my team, and prepared to return to the Blackwood National Forest. This time, I wasn't searching for the Millers. I was searching for answers. I was searching for the truth. I assembled a new team, more experienced and more willing to believe in the unexplainable. We were armed with advanced technology, specialized equipment, and a healthy dose of skepticism. We entered the forest with caution, our senses heightened, our minds prepared for the worst. We followed the same trail that we had taken years before, retracing the Millers' steps. The forest seemed to be waiting for us, its silence more ominous than ever. As we approached the campsite, I felt a familiar wave of nausea wash over me. The air was still thick with the cloying sweetness, the sickly sweet odor that made my stomach churn. The tent was gone, but the clearing remained, a scar on the face of the forest. We set up camp and began our investigation. We scanned the area with infrared cameras, looking for any anomalies. We used ground-penetrating radar to search for hidden objects. We collected soil samples and analyzed them for traces of unusual substances. We interviewed local residents, searching for any clues that might shed light on the mystery. But we found nothing. The forest remained silent, unyielding, its secrets locked away. As darkness approached, we built a fire and prepared for another night in the woods. The air grew colder, the shadows deepened, and the whispers in my mind grew louder. I felt like we were being watched, scrutinized by an unseen presence. Around midnight, we heard a noise in the woods, a rustling in the undergrowth that sounded like footsteps. We grabbed our flashlights and cautiously approached the edge of the clearing. We scanned the woods, our beams cutting through the darkness. And then we saw it. A figure, tall and slender, moving silently through the trees. It was the same figure that we had seen years before. It stopped for a moment as if it sensed our presence. It turned its head and looked directly at us. Its eyes glowed in the darkness like the eyes of a predator. But this time, we were prepared. We activated our night vision goggles and focused them on the figure. We saw it clearly for the first time. It was not human. It was not animal. It was something else entirely. Its skin was pale and smooth like polished bone. Its limbs were long and slender with sharp, claw-like fingers. Its head was elongated and narrow with large, black eyes that seemed to absorb the light. Its mouth was a thin, lipless slit filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth. It was a creature of nightmare, a being of pure darkness. The creature lunged at us, its movements lightning fast. We opened fire, our bullets tearing through the darkness. But the creature was too quick, too agile. It dodged our shots with ease, disappearing into the shadows. We pursued it, our hearts pounding in our chests, our minds filled with terror. We chased it through the woods, stumbling over roots and rocks, our flashlights illuminating the path ahead. The creature led us deeper and deeper into the forest, towards a place that we had never seen before. We reached a clearing, a vast expanse of open ground surrounded by towering trees. In the center of the clearing stood a massive structure made of twisted branches and woven vines. It was a gate, a portal, a doorway to another world. The creature stopped at the gate and turned to face us. It raised its arms and let out a deafening shriek, a sound that echoed through the forest and sent shivers down our spines. The gate began to glow, emitting a blinding light. The air crackled with energy. The ground trembled beneath our feet. We knew that we had to stop the creature to prevent it from opening the gate. We charged forward, our weapons blazing. But it was too late. The gate opened, revealing a swirling vortex of colors and shapes. A wave of energy surged forth, knocking us off our feet. We lay on the ground, stunned and disoriented as the creature stepped through the gate and vanished from sight. The gate closed behind it, leaving us alone in the clearing. The forest fell silent. The darkness returned. We had failed. We had allowed the creature to escape, to unleash its evil upon the world. We returned to the trailhead, defeated and demoralized. We reported our findings to the authorities, but they dismissed our claims as delusions brought on by stress and trauma. They closed the case, declaring the Millers' disappearance an unsolved mystery. But we knew the truth. We knew what had happened to the Millers. They had stumbled upon the gate, the portal to another world. They had been taken by the creature, dragged into the darkness. And now the creature was free, roaming the earth, spreading its terror and its evil. We vowed to continue the fight, to hunt down the creature and close the gate. We knew that it would be a long and arduous battle, but we were determined to protect humanity from the darkness that lurked in the Blackwood National Forest. We spent years searching for the creature, tracking its movements, following its trail of destruction. We learned its weaknesses, its habits, its desires. We discovered that it was not alone. It was part of a larger group, a secret society of beings that had been living in the shadows for centuries. They were the guardians of the gate, the protectors of the portal. They were the ones who had lured the Millers into the forest, sacrificed them to the creature. They were the ones who had orchestrated the cover-up, silenced the witnesses, and closed the case. We infiltrated their ranks, learned their secrets, and plotted their downfall. We gathered allies, recruited new members, and built a network of resistance. We prepared for the final battle, the showdown that would determine the fate of the world. The battle took place in the Blackwood National Forest at the site of the gate. We faced the creatures and their human allies, a fierce and bloody conflict that raged for days. We fought with courage and determination, fueled by our desire for justice and our determination to protect the innocent. We suffered losses, but we persevered. We pushed back the enemy, reclaiming the forest inch by inch. Finally, we reached the gate. We stood before the portal, facing the creature and its leaders. We engaged in a final, desperate battle, a clash of wills and weapons. We fought with all our might, our bodies aching, our spirits soaring. And in the end, we prevailed. We defeated the creature, banished it back to its own world. We closed the gate, severing the connection between our world and the realm of darkness. The forest fell silent. The darkness receded. The world was safe. We had won. But the victory came at a cost. Many lives were lost, many sacrifices were made. The Blackwood National Forest would forever be scarred by the events that had transpired there. And I, too, would be forever changed. I had seen the darkness, faced the evil, and survived the battle. But the memories would haunt me forever. The Millers' disappearance remained a mystery, their fate unknown. But I knew that they were at peace, their souls finally free from the clutches of the creature. And I knew that I had done everything in my power to avenge them, to protect others from the same fate. As I walked away from the Blackwood National Forest, I felt a sense of closure, a sense of peace. The battle was over, the war was won. But the darkness would always be there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to return. And I would always be ready to fight it, to protect the world from the evil that dwells in the shadows. Years later, I found myself drawn back to the area, not to the forest itself, but to the small town that bordered it. I felt a compulsion to understand, to piece together what I could of the Miller family's last days. I visited the local library, poring over old newspaper articles, town records, anything that might shed light on their time in Blackwood. I learned that John Miller was a local historian fascinated by the folklore of the region. He had been researching stories of strange occurrences in the forest, whispers of ancient rituals, and forgotten deities. Sarah Miller was a botanist drawn to the unique ecosystem of the Blackwood, particularly its rare and unusual plant life. Emily, their daughter, had a vivid imagination, often drawing fantastical creatures and landscapes inspired by her parents' stories and discoveries. The more I learned, the more I realized that the Millers weren't simply victims. They were explorers, seekers of knowledge who had stumbled upon something far beyond their understanding. They had opened a door that should have remained closed. One rainy afternoon, while browsing through antique shops in town, I came across a small, leather-bound journal hidden in the back of a dusty shelf. It was John Miller's. The journal was filled with his meticulous notes, sketches, and observations about the folklore of the Blackwood. He wrote about the ancient carvings on the trees, the strange tracks that had been sighted in the forest, and the whispers of a creature that dwelled in the shadows. He also wrote about the gate, the portal to another world, and the ritual that was required to open it. As I read his words, I felt a chill run down my spine. He had been so close to the truth, so eager to unravel the mysteries of the forest. But he had underestimated the danger, the power of the forces he was dealing with. The last entry in the journal was dated the day before the Millers disappeared. It was a frantic, almost incoherent account of a discovery he had made, a hidden location in the forest where the gate was said to be located. He wrote about feeling watched, of hearing whispers in the trees, of sensing a presence that was both terrifying and alluring. He ended the entry with a chilling statement, "I think they know I'm coming." I closed the journal, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that I had to return to the forest, to the hidden location that John Miller had described. I had to see the gate for myself to understand the truth about the Millers' disappearance. I gathered my gear, notified my team, and prepared for one last journey into the Blackwood National Forest. This time, I wasn't searching for a creature or a portal. I was searching for closure, for peace, for an end to the haunting that had consumed me for so long. We followed John Miller's notes, retracing his steps, venturing deeper and deeper into the forest. The trail was treacherous, overgrown with thorny vines and fallen trees. The air was thick with moisture, the silence broken only by the dripping of rain. We reached a clearing, a small, secluded area surrounded by ancient trees. In the center of the clearing stood a stone altar covered in moss and lichen. It was the place that John Miller had described in his journal, the location of the gate. I approached the altar, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran my hand over the cold, damp stone, feeling the weight of history, the presence of the unseen. And then I saw it. Hidden beneath a layer of moss, carved into the surface of the altar, were the same strange symbols that we had seen on the trees. The symbols were glowing faintly, as if they were still active, still resonating with some unknown energy. I realized that the gate wasn't just a physical portal, it was a metaphysical gateway, a connection between our world and another dimension. It was a place where the boundaries between reality blurred, where the laws of nature were suspended. As I stared at the symbols, I felt a presence, a sense of being watched. I turned around, my hand reaching for my weapon. And then I saw them. Standing in the shadows of the trees were three figures, their faces hidden in the darkness. They were tall and slender, their bodies adorned with strange markings. They were the guardians of the gate, the protectors of the portal. They had been waiting for me. They stepped forward, their eyes glowing with an unearthly light. They raised their hands and began to chant, their voices echoing through the forest. The symbols on the altar began to glow brighter, the air crackling with energy. I knew that they were trying to open the gate to unleash the evil that dwelled within. I had to stop them. I charged forward, my weapon blazing. But they were too powerful, too strong. They deflected my shots with ease, their movements lightning fast. They surrounded me, their chanting growing louder, their presence overwhelming. I felt myself weakening, my strength fading, my will collapsing. I knew that I was going to die. But then something unexpected happened. Emily Miller appeared. She was standing behind the guardians, her eyes filled with tears. She raised her hands and began to sing, a sweet, melodic tune that cut through the chanting. The guardians faltered, their chanting fading, their grip weakening. The symbols on the altar began to dim, the energy subsiding. I felt a surge of strength, a renewed sense of purpose. I pushed back against the guardians, breaking free from their grasp. I grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her towards me. Together, we stood before the altar, facing the guardians, our voices joined in a chorus of defiance. The guardians screamed, their bodies contorting in pain. They vanished into the shadows, leaving us alone in the clearing. The forest fell silent. The darkness receded. The gate was closed. We had won. I looked at Emily, her face illuminated by the moonlight. She was no longer a child, she was a spirit, a guardian, a protector of the forest. She had been waiting for me, guiding me, helping me to close the gate and defeat the evil. She was the key to everything. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. She smiled, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. "It's over now," she said. "You can rest." And then she faded away, disappearing into the mist. I stood there for a moment, alone in the clearing, listening to the sounds of the forest. I felt a sense of closure, a sense of peace. The miller's disappearance was no longer a mystery. It was a tragedy, a sacrifice, a testament to the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. I had found the truth, and I had finally found peace. I left the Blackwood National Forest, never to return. But I would never forget what I had seen, what I had learned, what I had experienced. The forest would always be a part of me, a reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface and the light that shines within us all. The end is never really the end, is it? Somewhere, deep within the shadowed woods, something stirs. The gate may be closed, but the cracks remain, and through those cracks, whispers seep, carried on the wind, waiting for a receptive ear, a curious mind, a family looking for a good hiking trail. The forest remembers, and it always waits. The story isn't over. It's just waiting to be retold. Someone will always find the trail. Someone will always hear the whispers, and the forest will always be there,